listening to the 4th annual presentation of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, brought to you by the makers of Campbell's Soups. We return you now to the Campbell Playhouse and Orson Welles.
On the stroke of 1, Scrooge had awakened suddenly and had sat him bolt upright in his own bed. He remembered the words of Marley's ghost and wondered from which direction the second specter would appear. He drew aside the curtains and established a sharp lookout all around the bed. At that moment, nothing between a baby and a rhinoceros would have astonished him very much. Now, being prepared for almost anything, he was not by any means prepared for nothing, and consequently, when no shape appeared, he was taken with a violent fit of trembling. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. A quarter of an hour went by, yet nothing came. And all this time he sat upon the bed with his nightcap upon his head, the very core and center of a blaze of ruddy light which streamed upon it. Being only light, this was more alarming than a dozen ghosts. As he was powerless to make out what it meant, he began to think that the source of this ghostly light might be in the adjoining room, from whence, on further tracing, it seemed to shine. He got up softly and shuffled in his slippers to the door. It was his own sitting room, there was no doubt about that. But it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceiling were so hung with living green that it looked a perfect grove, from every part of which bright gleaming berries glistened, and such a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney as had never been known in Scrooge's time or for many and many a winter season gone. Heaped upon the floor to form a kind of throne were turkeys, geese, game, poultry, great joints of meat, sucking pigs, long wreaths of sausages, mince pies, plum puddings, barrels of oysters, red-hot chestnuts, and seething bowls of punch that made the chamber dim with their delicious steam. And in easy state upon this couch, there sat a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch in shape not unlike Plenty's horn, and held it up high up to shed its light on Scrooge as he came peeping round the door.
Come in, Ebenezer Scrooge. You know me better, man.
Yeah.
I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me. You've never seen the like of me before.
Spirit, conduct me where you will. I went forth last time on compulsion and learned a lesson which is working now. If tonight you have anything to teach me, let me profit by it.
Touch my robe, Ebenezer Scrooge. Touch my robe.
The room vanished, so did the fire. The ruddy glow, the hour of night, vanished. Sunlight brushed them as they streamed through the clear morning air. Second spectre flew at a more leisurely speed, and Scrooge had time to observe people below him shoveling snow on the city roofs, calling out to one another from the parapets, and now and then pelting each other with snowballs. In the streets below them, the poulterers' shops were still half open, and the fruiterers were radiant in their holiday glory. Scrooge and his ghostly guide circled the tall spires as the steeples call good people all to church or chapel. And there below them lay Camden Town with its squalid streets of ugly frame houses. Of all these dwellings, the ghosts selected the humblest for their visit. Scrooge, by now past all surprise, recognized Bob Cratchit's wife, dressed in a twice-turned gown but brave in ribbons, busily laying the table. Assisting her was Belinda Cratchit, second of her daughters, also brave in ribbons, while Master Peter Cratchit plunged a fork into the saucepan of potatoes. And now two smaller Cratchits, boy and girl, came tearing in, screaming that outside the baker's they had smelled a goose and known it for their own, and now basking in luxurious thoughts of sage and onions. And 3 more young Cratchits danced about the table. Then once more, the door opened.
Martha, we've got a goose. Wait till you see it, Martha.
Oh, quiet, children, quiet. Why, bless your heart alive, Martha, my dear. How late you are. Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas, Mother.
Merry Christmas. How late you are, Martha.
Oh, we had a deal of work to finish up last night, and we had to clear away this morning.
Well, never mind, so long as you're here now. Sit you down before the fire and have a warm. Lord bless you.
But where's Father?
He's been to church with Tiny Tim. They'll be along directly.
How is Tiny Tim, Mother? Any better at all?
Sometimes I think he is, and sometimes I think, oh, dear God, if anything should happen to Tiny Tim, if Tiny Tim should die.
Mother, you mustn't even think of such a thing.
Here they come!
Merry Christmas, everybody, Martha.
Merry Christmas, Father, and Tim.
Merry Christmas, Martha.
And there was Bob Cratchit, with at least 3 feet of comfort exclusive of the fringe hanging down before him in his threadbare clothes, darned up and brushed to look seasonable, and Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. Poor Tiny Tim. He carried a little crutch and had his limbs supported by an iron frame.
How did little Tim behave in church, Bob?
Oh, I liked church, Mother. Oh, they sang the nicest hymns, and the people were so kind to me. It was such fun riding home on Daddy's shoulder.
He behaved as good as gold and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful sitting by himself so much and thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me coming home that he hoped people saw him in church because he was lame, and it might be pleasant for them to remember on Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see.
Tim, you darling.
Mother, the goose is ready. Mother, I'm having the
Oh, yes, children, all ready. Come, take your places and wait your turn. There's plenty of stuffing and dressing and plum pudding for all of you. Now, Martha, you take care of Tiny Tim. That's right. And see that he eats plenty. He must get strong and well.
Now shall we say grace?
Yes, Bob.
Our Father who art in heaven, we thank thee for the daily bread which in thy mercy thou dost give to us. Bless us this Christmas day, keep us all together, so that for many years to come we may unite here to do thy will and praise thy name. Amen.
Amen.
And now, my dears, with such a dinner, a toast. A Merry Christmas to us all, and God bless us.
God bless us. God bless us, everyone.
And now to Mr. Scrooge. I'll give you a toast to Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
The founder of the feast, indeed. Who pays you all of 15 shillings a week? I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast on, and I hope he'd have a good appetite for
My
it.
dear, the children, Christmas Day.
Well, it should be Christmas Day, I'm sure, on which one drinks the health of such an odious, stingy, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Bob. Nobody knows it better than you, poor fellow.
My dear, Christmas Day.
Well, I'll drink his health for your sake and the day's, not for his. Long life to him, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. You'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt.
And I say God bless him too, Mother. And everyone.
There was nothing of high mark in all this. They were not a handsome family, these Cratchits. They were not well-dressed. Their shoes were far from being waterproof. Their clothes were scanty and had known, very likely, the inside of a pawnbroker's. But they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, and contented with the time. And when at last they faded, Scrooge had his eye upon them, and especially on Tiny Tim, until the last.
Spirit! Spirit! Tell me if Tiny Tim will live.
I see a vacant seat in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner carefully preserved.
No, kind spirit. Say he will be spared. Say he will live.
If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die.
Many calls Scrooge made that night with the ghost of Christmas present. Now he stood upon a bleak and desert moor where monstrous masses of rude stone were cast about as though it were the burial place of giants. Down in the west, the setting sun had left a streak of fiery red which glared upon the desolation for an instant like a sullen eye, and then was lost in the thick gloom of darkest night. A light shone from the window of a hut. Passing through the wall of mud and stone, they found a cheerful company assembled around a glowing fire. An old man and woman with their children and their children's children, all decked out gaily in their holiday attire.
In this place, Ebenezer Scrooge, the miners live who labor in the bowels of the earth. Still, they know me. Do you hear?
The spirit did not tarry here, but bade Scrooge hold his robe. And passing on above the moor, they sped on. Whither? Not to see. To see. To Scrooge's horror, looking back, he saw the last of the land. Below him were the waves breaking upon a frightful range of rocks. But built upon a dismal reef of sunken stones, some league or so from shore, there stood a solitary lighthouse. Great heaps of seaweed clung to its base, and storm birds, born of the wind, rose and fell about it like the waves they skimmed. Again the ghost sped on above the dark and heaving sea, on and on until they lighted on a ship. They stood beside the helmsman at the wheel, the lookout in the bow, the men who had the watch, dark, ghostly figures in their several stations. Much they saw, and far they went, and many places they visited, but always with a happy end. The spirits stood beside sick beds, and they were cheerful. On foreign lands, and they were close at home. By poverty, and it was rich. In almshouse, hospital, and jail, where vain man in his little brief authority had not made fast the door and barred the spirit out, he left his blessing. It was a long night, if it were only a night. And it was strange, too, that while Scrooge remained unaltered, in his outward form, the ghost grew older, clearly older.
My life upon this globe is very brief, Ebenezer. It ends tonight.
Tonight?
Tonight at midnight. Hark. The hour is come.
Not yet. There are still more things I wish to learn.
These you will learn from still another spirit. Still another spirit, Ebenezer.
Scrooge looked about him, the ghost. It had vanished. And he found himself once more in his bed, in his dressing gown and his nightcap on his head. He heard the clock strike. And then he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes, beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming toward him like a mist along the ground. The spirit slowly, gravely, silently approached. In the very air through which it moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery.
I am the ghost of Christmas yet to come. Ebenezer Scrooge, I am about to show you the shadows of the things that have not happened, but will happen in the time before us.
Ghost of the future! I fear you more than any specter I've seen. Lead on! Lead on! The night is waning fast, and it is precious time. Scrooge followed in the shadow of its dress, which bore him up, he thought, and carried him along. And suddenly, they were in a room which Scrooge seemed to remember having seen before, where a woman and a child were.
Oh, my son, my little son, Tiny Tim. I loved him so. Mother, dear, you mustn't. It's almost time for Father to be home. Don't let him see you crying. Yes, Mother. He's late tonight. He walks slower than he used to. And yet, I've known him to walk very fast indeed, with Tiny Tim on his shoulder. So have I, Mother. But he was light to carry. And his father loved him so that it was no trouble. No trouble at all. Bob.
Good evening, my dear.
You're late, Bob.
I'm sorry, my dear. I went to the churchyard today. I wish you could have gone with me. It would have done your heart good to see how sweet and green a place it is. But you'll see it often. I promised Tiny Tim we'd walk there on Sunday.
Oh, Bob.
It's God's will, my dear.
Oh, my son, my little son. Tiny Tim. I loved him so. Oh.
Scrooge tried to break through the shade that held him to talk with Bob Cratchit, to speak some word of comfort, but the sleeve of the ghost of Christmas yet to come passed in front of him and shut the family from his view. And now they were in an obscure part of the town where Scrooge had never been before. The ways were foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched, the people drunken, slipshod, ugly. The whole quarter reeked with crime, with filth and misery. Deep in this den of infamous resort, there was a low-browed, beetling pawn shop where iron, old rags, and bottles were bought. And there was an old charwoman standing at the counter.
Undo my bundle, Joe.
I hope Scrooge didn't die of nothing catching, eh?
Don't be afraid. I ain't so fond of his company that I'd take a chance at that. You may look through that shirt till your eyes ache, and you won't find a hole in it. The best he had, and a fine one, too. He'd have wasted it if it hadn't been for me.
What you call a wasting of it, Mrs. Dilbert?
Putting it on him to be buried in. Somebody was fool enough to do it, but I took it off him again. If calico ain't good enough for such a purpose, it ain't good enough for anything. It can't look uglier than he did in that one, the old horror. And here's his bed curtains. Small use he'll have for him where he's going.
That's the truest word, what is that you ever spoke, Mrs. Dilbert.
So this is the end of him, you see. He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive to profit us when he was dead.
The phantom spread its dark robe before him for a moment like a wing, and withdrawing it revealed another place, a churchyard walled in by houses, overrun by grass and weeds, choked up with too much burying, fat with repleted appetite. A worthy place. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down toward it, and following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name.
Ebenezer Scrooge.
Spirit, am I the man who lay dead upon that bed? The spirit pointed from the grave to him and back again, and the upper portion of its deep black garment was contracted for an instant in its folds, as if it had inclined its head.
Ebenezer Scrooge.
And then Scrooge saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrank, collapsed, and dwindled into a bedpost. Yes, and the bedpost was his own, the bed was his own, the room was his own, best and happiest of all. The time before him was his own to make amends in. Running to the window, he opened it. He put out his head. No fog, no mist, clear, bright, jovial, stirring cold. Cold, piping for the blood to dance in. Golden sunlight, heavenly air, sweet, fresh air, merry bells. Oh, glorious, glorious. Oi! Oi! What's today?
What's that, sir?
What day is it, my fine fella?
Today? Why, it's Christmas Day.
Christmas Day? Christmas Day! That I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. All in one night.
I don't know what to do. I'm as light as a feather. I'm as happy as an angel. I'm as merry as a schoolboy. Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to all the world.
Next morning, Scrooge was early at his office. He went early for a reason. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late. That was the thing he'd set his heart upon, and he did it. Yes, he did. The clock struck 9. No Bob. 1:15, no Bob. Scrooge sat with his door wide open that he might see him come in. At last he came. His hat was off before he opened the door, his comforter too. He was on his stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock.
8 and 7 and 15, carry the 1, 24, carry the 2, 31 and 5, 36, 4, 7.
Hello? You, Cratchit.
Yes, sir.
Cratchit. Step this way, Cratchit, if
Yes,
you please.
Yes, sir.
Cratchit. What do you mean by coming in at this time of day?
I'm very sorry, sir. I am behind my time.
Here you are. Yes, I think you are.
It's only once a year, Mr. Scrooge. It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir.
And I'll tell you what, my friend. I'm not going to stand this sort of thing any longer. Therefore, Bob Cratchit, I'm about to raise your salary.
Are you quite yourself, sir?
No, thank heaven, I'm not quite myself. Merry Christmas, Bob. Merry Christmas, my good fella. A Merry Christmas, and I've given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary, and we'll see what we can do for Tiny Tim and the rest of your family. We'll discuss it this very afternoon over a Christmas bowl of smoking bishop, Bob. Make up the fires, make 'em up, and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another eye. Bob Cratchit!
And Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more, and to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. He had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle ever afterwards. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us and of all of us. And so as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone.
Sing hallelujah, sing hallelujah, sing glory to the Lord. Sing hallelujah, sing hallelujah, sing glory to the Lord. Sing hallelujah, sing hallelujah, sing glory to the Lord.
You have just heard the 4th annual presentation of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, offered for your enjoyment by the makers of Campbell's Soups. And here is Orson Welles.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the first year I've shared in this happy tradition of the Campbell Playhouse, and I'm only sorry that very, very grand actor, Lionel Barrymore, was not able to come to New York this Christmas to be part of our broadcast tonight. We're depending upon him to be with us next year, as he's been in the past, and I'm looking forward to it. And now, a word about next week's show. Next Friday night, I shall have the great pleasure of welcoming as our guest star one of the most elusive stars in motion pictures, Miss Katharine Hepburn. Miss Hepburn, making her first radio appearance in more than 4 years, joins me in a dramatization of Ernest Hemingway's greatest novel, Farewell to Arms. Ladies and gentlemen, the night before Christmas, and all through the Campbell Playhouse, not a creature is stirring that doesn't wish you a Merry Christmas. This goes for all of us, for my sponsor, for myself, for all of us, from Johnny Dietz, who runs the machinery in the control room, to Miss Hess, who types the Campbell Playhouse scripts. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas from all of us to all of you. Merry Christmas. Benny Herman and his band of merry melodians wish you a Merry Christmas. Ora Nichols and her demon crew of sound technicians wish you a Merry Christmas. Orson Welles and his considerable aggregation of dramatic talent, including Hiram Sherman, who played Bob Cratchit, Ray Collins, who was the man who asked for alms, Frank Reddick, who was the ghost of Christmas yet to come, Eustace Wyatt, who was the ghost of Christmas present, Arthur Anderson, who was the ghost of Christmas past, Al Shirley, who was Molly's ghost, Alice Frost, who was the charwoman, Brenda Forbes, who was Mrs. Cratchit, Joseph Cotton, who was Nephew Fred, Anna Stafford, who was Belle, Kingsley Colton, who was Tiny Tim, and George Spelman, who was Mr. Fezwig, all wish you a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas!
And finally, as Tiny Tim says,
God bless us, everyone.
Don't fail to listen in next Friday night when Orson Welles brings to the Campbell Playhouse Miss Katharine Hepburn in his own dramatization of Ernest Hemingway's great novel, A Farewell to Arms. This is Ernest Chappell wishing you all a very Merry Christmas on behalf of the makers of Campbell's Soups. This is the Columbia Broadcasting System.